Hi guys, welcome to today's session. We're going to be carrying on with some more ink work like the last couple of weeks. So we're sort of building gradually, working in ink and cross-hatching and that sort of thing. And last week we did some brushwork, kind of like a no-tan brushwork piece. We'll be moving towards doing something a bit kind of more larger, and combining brushwork and pen work. So if you watch the first of these ink drawing series, you remember I was using a little quill pen. So again, I'm going to be using a quill pen for this piece. You can see I've just got a photo of an apple that I took just now. So just because it's tricky to set the apple up and have it visible to you guys while I'm working, it seemed easier to work from a photo. But if you're doing your own study, definitely you can work from life. It's probably preferable. So yeah, we're just going to be doing just an isolated little study of the apple, so not the background. The outline of the apple is going to be the end of the drawing. But we're just going to be looking at some kind of slightly more complex hatching techniques and kind of gradually building up textures and that sort of thing using the pen. So in terms of materials, I've got this quill, just like a little kind of fairly soft drawing quill, if you've got any familiarity with quills. And just a piece of general paper that I'm using, I think sort of like a printmaking type paper. Ink, this time I'm just using some Winsor Newton ink, which you can get pretty much anywhere. I think this black Winsor Newton ink, Indian ink, which means it's waterproof, so if you were doing like colour washes over the ink, it's a good choice if you're doing watercolour and that sort of thing. Then just a pencil and a kneadable eraser. I'm not going to be using the pencil a lot. I'm going to be jumping quite quickly into the pen drawing, but we can get started. So as always, I'm just kind of like going to generally box in how big I want this, how big this apple is going to be on the paper. Sort of find a width for it, find a top and a little bottom of the shape of the apple. There's obviously a fair bit of kind of flexibility in terms of the shape the apple can eventually take on. So now I'm just trying to look for how it sort of slopes slightly down to the left a little bit, the shape of it, partly the way it's sitting. So I'm just building a little bit on that initial setup. Got that little dimple there. I'm not being super accurate, I'm just trying to really using the apple as a reference point to get started with the drawing. In terms of shadow, I can kind of see the kind of most shadowy part of the apple runs kind of slightly down this left hand side here, and I don't really need too much more than that, I think, to get going. That definitely captures the apple quite nicely. So we're going to get started just with some sort of notations in ink, erase that back, and then start to kind of work on hatching a bit. So I'm just going to be working, dipping the quill in the ink, so you can see that's caught some ink there. And it's slightly trickier working because I'm kind of demonstrating to you guys, because the quill obviously prefers the ink to be flowing downwards. It's sort of gravity fed basically. But you'll get the idea. Basically, it should be easier once you actually start doing your own drawing like this. So using the quill on its side, I can get a slightly finer line. Down here, we're going to be going for a thicker line, so I can kind of press a little bit harder. Just using that pencil drawing as my initial guide. I'm going to be working quite hard with this piece. You can see the apple's kind of fairly nicely established now. I'm going to let that dry slightly, and then I just want to erase off my pencil lines, because I want to try to kind of work with gradually hatching this piece rather than sort of working with masses. So when we do painting and drawing, like in pencil, often we'll kind of use like large shaded areas and work back and forth into those. But with this, I want to focus on trying to use the kind of direction of line. Sort of on this left-hand edge, there's not going to be a great deal of hatching or shading in terms of line work. Then that right-hand edge is going to have more to start to try to build up that sense of the form turning. And I'm going to try as much as possible to keep my lines, my hatch lines, kind of moving across the direction of the form. So some of them will be rolling across each other to create a darker kind of quality. Obviously, if you layer your hatching, that's going to start to make things feel darker. I'm going to be trying to focus on like the direction of the light turning. So when the form is turning out, sort of from this bottom darker edge up into the lighter edge of the apple that you can sort of see on the left there, we want it to be, the lines are going to be following, like working at the same direction as the rolling form. I kind of think of it as barreling, so it's like you're drawing down the side of the barrel, not always across the barrel. The same thing is always useful in almost any kind of media that you might draw or paint in. Even if you're painting, you can do that sort of thing. So I'm hoping that's dry. It's quite a delicate paper, this, so I don't want to... not quite dry, but that's okay. Mostly dry. But as it's a sketch, I'm not too fussed. So, kind of cleaned up, made a slight mess, but mostly cleaned up that sketch. So now we can get into starting to work on this hatching. And I'm going to work from the dark side first. It's always easier to you have a bit more forgiveness kind of working on the dark side of the form, whereas the light side of the form, we want to be careful we don't over model. I'm just following just the direction of the apple as it rolls out of that shadow. And also sort of starting to allow the lines to cluster a little bit more as they get closer to the edge of the form. I'm allowing a certain amount of texture to kind of build into the hatching, because there is that texture on the apple that we'll be kind of looking at. So a little bit of form starting to turn on that left hand side, but as I say, not too much. Definitely got a bit kind of wrapping back down into that little dip. So these lines moving in a different direction, I'm starting to kind of suggest how things are kind of flowing in and out of the divot shape. Where they cross, that's where we get this kind of deeper color. just gradually spiraling our way around with this hatching. So as you can see, generally trying to follow the form. It's a bit easier from some angles than others. You'll probably find if you're working with the drawing in a more normal position, you should be able to kind of move the drawing around rather than having to move yourself around the drawing like I am in this setup. And certainly working sort of over the top of the drawing will help. So we're getting there in terms of form. Not too much more to do, I think, just the level of detail we're going with this one. Which means that once the form is sort of more established, can start to put some of those little kind of details, the textures and so on, that I'm starting to now build up a little bit. Just little spots and so on. Also just going to can see a sort of slightly deeper emphasis on the base of the apple in shadow. Just a little bit down the edge of the shadow, just to give a slight sense of reflected light that you get in the original. Maybe a similar sort of thing down on that side as well there. Yeah, and I think we're up to about sort of 23 minutes in now, so we don't want to overdo it on this drawing, but hopefully you get the idea of how we sort of built on that first little leaf sketch. and sort of just elaborated our hatching a little bit. I think for the next one of these, I'm going to take a look at my my drawing setup just so I can work above it, because it's quite tricky working with the quill in this sort of angle, as nice as it is for showing you guys. So we'll work out a sort of top-down method next time, but we got there with this one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So have a go. I mean, a piece of fruit, something round, is quite good for kind of figuring out these sorts of directional hatching techniques. But yeah, pretty much it. I mean, you could do an egg, but it's maybe not quite as interesting as something like an apple or a pear, or get some kind of like round thing that you can work from life. Yeah, have a go at that. And if you're part of the OCAD recreational course, which you can find the link for below, you can post it and get some feedback. Otherwise, have a go yourself and just post in YouTube as well. And as always, follow us on YouTube so you get this and lots of other videos from other tutors. But otherwise, I'll see you guys soon.